I'm very pleased to welcome to this show, to a very special show actually tonight. Big stories around, big important stories, and who better to discuss them with than the chief political writer for Spiked Online. He's written a great piece in The Spectator today about Charlie Kirk. Brendan O'Neill, welcome Brendan.
Hi Kevin, how's it going?
Good, but a very sad week, and you've written brilliantly, characteristically of course, about Charlie Kirk, who you met a couple of times. Before we talk about the implications of what's happened and this kind of spew of hatred from the left that may have brought about this explosion of violence, tell us what you thought about Charlie. What kind of a guy was he?
Yeah, I met him a couple of times. I met him in LA while recording a podcast. We were both on the same podcast. He was quite shy, surprisingly quite shy, but also very smart, very on the money. He knew what he was thinking. He was incredibly articulate. He struck me as a very sincere young man, and he had very passionate, strong beliefs, and he was not afraid to express them. And I think, that's one of the reasons I think that he's been targeted, because of his beliefs, because he has certain pro-Trump beliefs, but also fundamentally because he supports the idea of free discussion. His whole devotion of his political career was to having open debates, especially on campus. He wanted to hear everyone's opinions. He wanted to challenge their opinions. He wanted them to challenge his opinions. That was the classic American tradition of free, open discussion. And for doing that, he was gunned down. This was a grotesque, violent assault on freedom itself, I think.
It really was, and as your piece in the Specky today says, it's also an assault on America itself. Before we continue, Brendan, bear with us. Let's listen to the president paying tribute to Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was a close ally of Trump. Trump credits him with getting the youth vote, the younger vote, in both 2016 and the last election. So basically, Donald Trump says, without Charlie Kirk, I might not have made it. So let's have a listen to Donald talking about his friend Charlie.
My great fellow Americans, I am filled with grief and anger at the heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk on a college campus in Utah. Charlie inspired millions, and tonight all who knew him and loved him are united in shock and horror. Charlie was a patriot who devoted his life to the cause of open debate and the country that he loved so much, the United States of America. He fought for liberty, democracy, justice, and the American people. He's a martyr for truth and freedom, and there's never been anyone who was so respected by youth. This is a dark moment for America. Charlie Kirk traveled the nation, joyfully engaging with everyone interested in good faith debate. His mission was to bring young people into the political process, which he did better than anybody ever, to share his love of country and to spread the simple words of common sense. Today, because of this heinous act, Charlie's voice has become bigger and grander than ever before, and it's not even close. May God bless his memory. May God watch over his family. And may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Yeah, Brendan, lest we forget, good words there from the president, I thought, but lest we forget, Charlie Kirk was a 31-year-old husband, his wife Erica, and he had two little kids who shockingly were in the audience as he was shot from a range of 200 yards. I don't know if you've had the misfortune to see the video of it actually happening. I have. I don't recommend it. But the idea that his little kids saw that and his wife is just, it's just awful, awful.
It's truly awful. I mean, the only thing you can compare it to in terms of that personal shock that the family must have felt was the assassination of JFK back in the 1960s, which of course Jacqueline Kennedy witnessed and was incredibly distressed by. I mean, it is similar to that. And we all saw this assassination as well on TV, on the internet. It's very hard to avoid the video. The video is absolutely grotesque. One of the things that really struck me about the video, and I can't get this image out of my head, is that he was wearing a T-shirt that said the word freedom on it. It was just a white T-shirt, and emblazoned across it in black lettering was the word freedom. And then suddenly that word, that brilliant word, that word that holds out so much promise for people, was covered in blood. You know, liberty was, you know, we often hear of blood being spilt for freedom. In this case, it was literally true. The blood of a young man who had spent his life fighting for freedom, especially freedom of speech, was suddenly staining the word freedom itself. And I thought that was so symbolic of what this incident really represents, which is, I think, the savagery of cancel culture, the barbarism of the new censorship, which would prefer to murder someone rather than hear an alternative point of view. So that's an incredibly serious situation.
Yeah, and let's stress that Charlie Kirk, he was a man of the right, but he was not far right. He was a traditional Republican. He believed in family values. He was a Christian. He was pro-life. All perfectly legitimate opinions. Now, people on the left will take someone like Charlie Kirk and basically call him the devil. And therein lies our problem. Now, you know, I don't want to exonerate people from the right. You know, people from the right are no angels, and, you know, I'm guilty of it myself. I call people on the left names a lot, but, you know, I tend to stick to things like idiot, moron, things like that, which I think is fair enough in the hurly-burly of political debate. But there's something about the way the left attack scions of the right, or people of the right, that goes beyond the pale. Only yesterday, in fairness, before the tragedy, John McDonnell, the former shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, the former veteran Labour MP at the TUC conference, compared Reform UK to the Nazis of the 1930s and effectively hailed Nigel Farage to be the new Adolf Hitler. Meanwhile, a guy called Matthew Dowd, we broke this story last night on the left-wing American news channel MSNBC, a guy called Matthew Dowd effectively said, well, you know, if you're going to say these awful things and have these awful thoughts, you've got this coming to you. Awful things are going to happen. What are his awful words and his awful thoughts? They are right-wing opinions. Or they're not even that right-wing, they're right-of-centre opinions. To the left, this is evilness incarnate. The left are the people who've got to get their act in order. John McDonnell should hang his head in shame for what he said about Farage and Reform UK. But of course, today he's gone into a sulky silence. But I think, do you think, I mean, I don't want to get too optimistic about this, but do you think that perhaps the awful tragedy of yesterday may precipitate some kind of turning point, that maybe the rhetoric might be dialed down a little bit?
It's really hard to tell, isn't it? You know, I think what it will make clear to many, many people is that wokeness is basically a death cult. You know, that's what it is. You know, these are the woke left made excuses for the mass murder of Jews on the 7th of October. They celebrated Luigi Mangione when he murdered a CEO, shot him in the back. They said death to TERFs, death to gender-critical feminists for daring to criticize the ideology of transgenderism. And now some of them in the underbelly of the internet are even celebrating, or at least making excuses for, the killing of this 31-year-old man, Charlie Kirk, whose only crime, as far as I can tell, is that he liked to have a good faith debate. These are people who are very often pro-murder or pro-death, or they dream at least of the disappearance of their enemies, the disappearance of people who dare to go against the grain. And that's a savage form of intolerance. I think that's what we have seen now, that in the intolerance of the woke, the intolerance of cancel culture has a really horrible, violent edge to it, where you either call for violence against feminists or whoever it might be, or you celebrate violence when it actually takes place. This is a new form of barbarism. And I think if there is one optimistic thing that comes out of this, is that I think more and more people's eyes are being open to that. And they now recognize that there is a real danger to the ideology of cancellation, the ideology of censorship, because it seems it will stop at nothing to prevent people from saying what you're not supposed to say.
Exactly right. And it's extraordinary how many left-wingers today are saying good riddance, you know, we've lost a stain on humanity. I mean, they don't even see, as you put it, the barbarism of that kind of statement, given that a young father, a young husband has just been gruesomely shot dead for the crime of a political debate and stating what he felt, which again, I must stress, was not extreme. Let's have a look at Charlie Kirk when he was at the Oxford Union recently.
From my perspective, Britain is one of the greatest countries in the history of the world. You are the country of Shakespeare, the steam engine, and Adam Smith. You defeated Napoleon, you destroyed the slave trade, you stood up to Hitler. My country, America, became great as it is because of what we inherited from you, from Britain. When I hear the slogan, "Make America Great Again," I'm also hearing, quote, "Return America to its British roots." Great Britain has everything in the world to be proud of. But when I look at Britain today, I see a country where the ruling elites are in a race to abandon the values that made them so great in the first place.
There he is, Brendan. He's hitting the nail on the head there. Charlie Kirk, President Trump, J.D. Vance, people say, oh, they hate Britain. No, they don't. They love Britain, and they're worried about Britain because they see a government, they see a political elite that are eroding our right to freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Charlie Kirk expressing that brilliantly there. That was, sadly, until yesterday, a future president in the making. But there he is, talking about freedom of speech. Now, in America, you know, you have an administration that has enshrined it. The First Amendment, the most sacred amendment they have, freedom of speech. We are losing our freedom of speech now, aren't we?
Oh, absolutely we are. And isn't it extraordinary, Kevin, that it took this young man from America, this conservative firebrand, as people refer to him, it took someone like that to come to the UK and remind us that we're a wonderful country with a history that we can be proud of and traditions we can be proud of. Because in this country itself, the fashionable view now, certainly amongst the political class and the media class, is that Britain is a pigsty, horrible, just one litany, one crime against humanity after another. That's our history. We should be ashamed of what we did in the slave trade rather than celebrating our abolition of it. We should be ashamed of empire. We should be constantly self-flagellating for the crimes of the past. That's the fashionable view. And I bet you that a lot of those pompous, woke, bourgeois students at the Oxford Union were rolling their eyes when Charlie Kirk was praising this country, because they've been educated to think that this is not a good country and that you should be ashamed of being white, you should be ashamed of being British, you should be ashamed of being privileged, and so on and so forth. So it's extraordinary that it took him to come here and remind us of our greatness. I wish more British politicians would speak like that. But you're right. The other thing he shone a light on, as has J.D. Vance, is that our freedom of speech is going down the toilet. This country did so much to build up the modern ideal of freedom of speech. Right from the 1600s through to the 1900s, Britain played a key role in developing the idea of freedom of thought and freedom of speech. And we are abandoning that. We're sacrificing it at the altar of political correctness. And that really needs to be turned around.
Yeah, and when old Starmer went over to see Trump not so long ago, that excruciating moment in the Oval Office where I think it was J.D. Vance pointed out that there's a bit of a freedom of speech problem in Britain, and Starmer, well, no, we have freedom of speech in this country for 300 years. We're very proud of it. And I'm shouting at the TV screen, you just sent someone to jail for nearly 3 years for a tweet. You're killing freedom of speech. I've got a feeling that Starmer and his gang don't even realise the damage they're doing to our historical freedoms.
Oh, absolutely. You know, he sent someone to jail for 31 months for a tweet. Thankfully, she was let out a bit early. Graham Linehan was recently arrested by 5 armed police and questioned over 3 tweets, which were all just funny tweets. 30 people a day are questioned or interrogated by the police over things they say on the internet. That's what's happening in this country right now. And, you know, as Rosie Duffield has pointed out, the Labour MP, I think she's an independent now.
Yeah, she is.
She dares to speak out against the trans ideology. She makes the point that she was punished by the Labour Party for her beliefs. She was unable to attend Labour conference one year because of the threats she received. The idea that this is a party that believes in freedom of speech, it won't even let women say that only women have have a cervix, which is biologically true. Humankind has understood that as a fact for millennia. And suddenly, if you say it, Labour will punish you and oust you. Keir Starmer doesn't know what freedom of speech even means. And for him to go to America and say, we still defend freedom of speech, that was a barefaced lie.
It really was.